Chilean fishermen protesting to demand a return to work at one of the country's major seaports were shot at by the Navy, causing various injuries. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro Moros announced the country will begin the production of the Cuban Covid-19 vaccine Abdala in January 2022. Lawmakers in the West African nation of Benin have voted to extend abortion rights. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. Chilean fishermen protesting to demand a return to work at one of the country's major seaports were shot at by the Navy, causing various injuries. More than 200 fishermen in boats of different sizes protested in the port of Valparaiso on Wednesday to demand the Chilean government fulfill an agreement to build a new dock at the port for their use. According to the lawyer, also the attorney, the workers expect to be compensated for the next 4 years during which they will be unable to work. 8 years ago, the fishermen were temporarily removed from an area of the port of Valparaiso, where they operated due to a construction work.
They are very fragile ecosystems, so a little less rain or a little more rain will take them out of this kind of balance they are in and can change them. They are unique ecosystems in the sense that the plants that survive here have to have a series of very particular strategies just to allow them to survive here.
The main user of water at the moment is agriculture, food production, so in order to be able to adapt to a climate crisis scenario, we need to understand the natural processes as well. These laboratories are in fact a natural laboratory for us.
During a press conference in Panama City, the presidents of Panama, Costa Rica, and the Dominican Republic called on the United States to take concrete measures to curb migration. The chief concern of the three presidents was Haitian asylum seekers who have been crossing Latin America in an attempt to reach the U.S. According to Panama's president, Laurentino Cortizo, the movement of large numbers of Haitians across Central America is an unsustainable problem. Now we address other topics, and this is good news. Chile's Atacama Desert bloom, an impressive natural phenomenon that draws tourists and scientists alike, is threatened by climate change. The Atacama Desert is the driest in the world, but every few years, at springtime, a little corner of the landscape is covered in a carpet of blooming purple and yellow flowers, a phenomenon that experts are studying to learn how plants adapt to climate change. The bloom occurs as the seeds of some 200 desert plants germinate due to heavy rainfall every 5 to 7 years.
I've known since the bidding for Terminal 2 began that they were promised a port 9 years ago that still has not been built. They don't take it seriously. We are taking the fishermen here to protest because of the government's inability to plan and for removing the fishermen and taking them to a place that does not belong to them. And now they are asking for what is rightfully theirs. We will continue here until we have a solution. Unfortunately, this situation already got out of the control because there is no longer control over the bases, and unfortunately, we will have to move on to the last resort. This is an issue that has already been ignored, and unfortunately, the presidential delegate, Jorge Martinez, does not show up here. He does not take responsibility.
250,000 homes were affected by power cuts in France on Thursday due to the passage of Storm Aurora. According to local media, the natural phenomenon registered wind gusts of 176 kilometers per hour in the Normandy region, where great weather conditions hamper vehicular traffic, forced the suspension of train services, and caused the blockage of several highways after trees and branches were downed. The first storm of the autumn this season began sweeping through northern France on Wednesday afternoon before advancing eastward. 15 departments were put on alert as the storm approached. Floods and landslides sparked by heavy rains in India and Nepal have left at least 200 people dead so far. Emergency and civil defense officials said that disaster management committees are actively working on rescue operations and attending to the victims. Experts know the increasingly unpredictable and extreme weather that has hit South Asia in recent years, caused by climate change and exacerbated by deforestation, damming, and excessive development. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the South. The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, announced on Thursday that the country will begin the production of the Cuban Covid-19 vaccine Abdala in January 2022, after a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister of Cuba, Ricardo Cabrizas. In this sense, after the meeting, the Venezuelan president stressed that soon 56% of the country's population has already been immunized against COVID-19, and it is expected in December to arrive in the country 16 million doses of the Cuban immunizer Abdala to complete the vaccination scheme.
We are thinking of producing the Cuban vaccine in Venezuela, and coordinations has already been made. So, in January, to be in condition. In January, with a vaccine production plant that was an investment of our commander Hugo Chavez of the world's greatest technology, already coordinated with the scientific institutions of Cuba and produce the Abdala vaccine in Venezuela. We are thinking.
And we'll remain on topic. The Cuban government reported that almost 100% of the vaccinable population has already received at least one dose of the vaccines produced in the island against COVID-19. Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez referred to the rapid progress achieved through the national vaccination campaign, highlighting that 99.6% of the population has received at least one dose of a vaccine. The Foreign Minister also pointed out that 70% of Cubans have been fully vaccinated, while the efforts continue to ensure 90% are fully vaccinated by the end of November. Authorities emphasized that the objective of the vaccination plan is to save lives. Official numbers place Cuba as the country with the highest immunization rate in the Americas and the nation with the highest daily vaccination rate in the world. As two countries with historic ties of friendship and solidarity, 1.2 million doses of Cuban vaccines against COVID-19 arrived in Nicaragua to continue the vaccination campaign. The batch of Abdala and Soberano 2 vaccines is the first shipment of the three planned before the end of the year to complete the 7 million doses agreed between the two countries. The Nicaraguan government is preparing the logistics for the distribution of the vaccines to the population, which will be provided free of charge and voluntarily. The country began its vaccination campaign against the coronavirus in March, starting with people over 30 years of age, the chronically ill and pregnant women using the AstraZeneca, Covishield, Sputnik V and Pfizer vaccines. And India has now administered 1 billion doses of vaccines against COVID-19 as it fights its way back from a devastating surge in cases that brought the health system too close to collapse. Despite the progress made in the vaccination campaign, authorities remain on guard for a new pandemic wave. About 3/4 of adults in the country of 1.3 billion people have had one shot, and 30% are fully vaccinated, according to the government figures. However, hundreds of millions of Indians under 18 years old, who make up about 40% of the population, have not had a single shot. More than 200,000 people died in a devastating COVID-19 wave from mid-April to mid-June.
To achieve 1 billion doses, means that we have protected a large proportion of our population. We need about 2 billion doses to be able to reach everybody, but it's very unlikely that we will reach all adults. So we are already more than halfway there in terms of reaching the whole population and making sure that a significant proportion of people have had their second doses.
Firstly, it is good that we have completed 100 crore vaccinations in the country. So the second thing is actually it has taken a lot of time. And I think it has taken a lot of time because we still have challenges with our logistics and manufacturing. So because of that, it has taken a lot of time. And we still have a long way to go.
Moroccans are rushing to get vaccinated as the North African country launched a mandatory COVID-19 pass, which requires vaccination for various activities such as travel between provinces, access to tourist sites, and entry into public administrations.
I came to get my first dose of the vaccine. I had to because my employer made it mandatory to get vaccinated. I printed out my vaccination pass so that I can walk around, enter cafes and even travel without anyone stopping me. You just have to show this document to pass. It's like an identity card.
Authorities in China canceled hundreds of flights, closed schools and ramped up mass testing on Thursday to try and stamp out a new COVID-19 outbreak linked to a group of tourists. Beijing has maintained a relentless zero-COVID approach with strict border closures and targeted lockdowns, which analysts note is part of the reason for its success in controlling the spread of the virus and saving lives. While domestic outbreaks have largely been eliminated, authorities logged a fifth day straight of new cases on Thursday, mostly in northern and northwestern areas, leading them up to the coronavirus controls. On average, 40% of health professionals in the world are fully vaccinated against COVID-19, but these figures hide huge disparities between regions, as noted by the Director General of the World Health Organization, who reiterated the need for equity in sharing vaccines.
119 countries suggest that on average, 2 in 5 health and care workers globally are fully vaccinated. But of course, that average masks huge differences across regions and economic groupings. In Africa, less than 1 in 10 health workers have been fully vaccinated. Meanwhile, in most high-income countries, more than 80% of health workers are fully vaccinated. The G20 countries must fulfill their dose-sharing commitments immediately. Manufacturers must prioritize and fulfill their contracts with COVAX and AVAT as a matter of urgency.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Lawmakers in the West African nation of Benin have voted to extend abortion rights. Abortions were previously authorized in the country if pursuing the pregnancy threatened the life of the mother was the result of a rape of incest or when the unborn child was a particular severe affection. But after a heated debate in Parliament late on Wednesday, with some lawmakers strongly opposed to legalizing abortion further, the amendment finally passed.
I'm very, very happy that from now on we can give this right back to the woman, to autonomy over her body and to decide for herself. For a long time in our country, the woman was subject to decisions taken by her husband. 20% of female deaths are the result of clandestine abortion, and 50% of maternal deaths among women in general are because of clandestine abortion. I think of the women, and I think that in these conditions we should give her the possibility to choose to get rid of the embryo or not. Even doctors at times are forced to choose between the life of the mother or the life of the child, And I don't think that are many of this earth, even in our most traditional families. Many people who say, listen, sacrifice the mother and bring us the child.
Afghan women leaders addressed reporters Thursday at the United Nations. The women accused the Taliban of human rights violations and are calling on the international community to hold them accountable before the situation worsens.
The predictions were that the Taliban probably have become more moderate and will be more tolerance and acceptance towards the population's civic liberty. But the reality is that since they have taken over, there's been a systematic exclusion of women from social and education sphere. Religious minorities have been pushed to leave their villages. There have been oppression, forced disappearance, and many other forms of human rights violation in Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan, we all failed it. Moving forward, if we abandon it, and if we abandon the people of Afghanistan, the consequences are going to be huge, not only on the people of Afghanistan, but on the rest of the world. The prediction.
We are here to ask the leaders of the world and the all member states and UN agencies that it's a shared responsibility. It's not, they cannot put everything on our shoulders or ex-former government shoulders, on Taliban shoulders. It's a shared responsibility. And we are here also to urge the international community to think about those women and children that they are at risk, at a high risk. I know that they cannot evacuate everybody from Afghanistan, 35 million people or 36 million people. It's hard to be evacuated from Afghanistan, but at least those that they are really at risk, they should be considered, and then international community should pay attention. And also we are here to urge and then ask international community and member states and UN agencies to continue their support in terms of humanitarian assistance, because winter is coming. Afghanistan is a drought affected country, and then we are in really need of food and shelters.
You mentioned recognition.
Now we'll move on to other topic. Palestinians living in Syria and their compatriots on the occupied territories have been rallying in support of the prisoners of hunger strike in Israeli jails. We have more details in the following report by our correspondent Hisham Wanos.
The leaders of the Alliance of Palestinian Forces in Syria convened a meeting in Damascus to coordinate the measures to be taken against the escalating aggressions of the Israeli occupation against Palestinian prisoners. In addition to organizing protests, the participants condemned the silence of the global community in the face of the Israeli crimes, declared a general state of alarm, and stated that all options are on the table to save the prisoners, including military actions. We reaffirm the support of all Palestinian forces and factions based in Syria for the prisoners, and at the same time condemn the silence of the international organizations, led by the United Nations and its Human Rights Council, in the face of this criminal and savage action by the Zionist entity and its inhuman, oppressive measures against all detainees, in particular those who went on hunger strike. Preparations are currently underway to negotiate a prisoner exchange agreement, and this agreement will not be the end of our struggle, as all Palestinian forces are committed to uniting their efforts and continuing the struggle using all means at their disposal until all Palestinian prisoners are released. Meanwhile, representatives of the Palestinian community in Syria organized a sit-in protest in front of the headquarters of the Red Cross in Damascus. The demonstrators, in support of the hunger strike carried out by the imprisoned brothers in Israeli jails, handed over a letter of protest to the organization and called on all human international organizations and human and prisoners' rights institutions to mediate in order to stop the oppressive practices of the Israeli occupation against the detainees. We demand that the Red Cross send an urgent medical mission to monitor the health condition of the prisoners who went on hunger strike and to keep track on the detainees isolated in prisons of the Israeli occupation, and we ask this organization to exert pressure to stop the escalation of Israeli violence against the prisoners of the Islamic Jihad. In addition to the popular protests, the Palestinian resistance factions have the option of kidnapping Israeli soldiers to force the occupation authorities to negotiate prisoner exchange agreements. Likewise, in case they do not succeed in this way, and in case the Zionists continue with their inflexibility of not responding to the demands of the prisoners, we have other options, and that resistance will not stand idle. The Zionist occupation regime increased the repressive measures against the Palestinian prisoners. After the escape last September, the six of them from the Gilboa prison and their recent capture, an aggressive escalation in the face of which 250 detainees of the Islamic Jihad movement in Palestine have been on hunger strike for 10 days, while 7 others have been without food or liquids for almost 3 months. The prisoners, although suffering from very difficult health conditions, continue with the hunger strike through which they seek to unite the Palestinian people in the struggle for the release of the nearly 5,000 inmates suffering from harsh conditions of detention, including 41 women, 225 children, and some 600 prisoners in need of urgent medical attention.
Incluidas 41 mujeres, 225 niños y unos 600 prisioneros que necesitan una intervención médica urgente. Hisham Wanous, TeleSUR, Oriente Medio.
Thank you, Hisham, for this report. And now we have come to the end of this news brief. But you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.